I don't know if you so much were, but I remember Elliott saying that we don't want a mercenary for a quarterback. And at the beginning of the day yesterday, I thought that was, even before I saw it, I mean, this was long before you guys came on, but I thought the same thing. I was like, man, I don't want a one-year disposal quarterback. And then as the day went on and I knew signing day was the next day today, I was like, man, you know what? Like, I got to buy in. This might be the reality of college football. And if you can go out and land Miller Moss, I think you do. And I'm going to be completely honest. If Iowa doesn't spend, and Matt Rule said it right, $1 million, $1.5 million on a, and that's a good quarterback. With a good quarterback, and here's another thing, I just want to bring this up quick before I forget, is Tyler Barnes today said, I want to bring up two things Tyler Barnes said. One I think is positive, and one kind of threw me back when I really thought about it after the press conference. But the first thing is, he said, the question was about Terrence Smith, and he said, yeah, now we got to go out and get a guy with speed. So that's a super positive thing to hear. And then, but the one thing, and Corey, I don't know if you caught this or Kyle, that he said that threw me back is when they were asking questions about quarterbacks, he said, we don't want a statue back there at quarterback. No matter how good your offensive line is, at times you're going to have to move around. Did you guys catch that?
Yeah. Yeah, I did hear. I guess maybe I didn't hear exactly the way you repeated it, but yeah, I did hear that. And for the record, my only hesitancy on Miller Moss, I know Elliott yesterday on the show brought up, the fact that he's only got 1 year. That's one thing. My other concern, and I'll voice this for people that didn't hear the show with Mark and Kyle, I'll get your take on this as well. My concern is simply situational, because you brought in Cade McNamara from a blue blood. He was, quote unquote, developed by a former quarterback, a QB's guru in Jim Harbaugh. He got beat out by a highly touted, more mobile version of himself. And he's sort of bitter. So he enters the portal and jumps to Iowa and becomes the promised son. There are too many parallels there on the outside, like on surface level. And I don't know that some of those, I don't know that bill fits, that glove fits Miller Moss's hand. But I look at Miller Moss, coached by Lincoln Riley, a QB's guru, loses his job, isn't very mobile. And I'm just like, okay, what, and I trust Tim Lester more than I trust a quarter of Tim Lester's brain more than I trust all of Brian Ferentz's. And I'm talking about football. I'm not talking about personal, I'm talking about football brain. So if he sees something in Miller Moss and is like, okay, yeah, this is the guy we want to target, I'm going, that's great. Okay. I'm not going to act like I know more than Tim Lester, and I'm not claiming to act like I know more than Brian Ferentz. I lauded that pickup when they landed Cade McNamara at that time. And some things you can't foresee. I'm just a little bit gun shy based on some of what happened in landing Cade McNamara. You also get the suspension for Kirk Ferentz. I think it's strange, Trent, that there was a tweet from Pete Nakos of On3 that said Iowa's an early suitor for Miller Moss before he had even entered into the portal officially.
I agree with
so
that.
What does that mean? What does it mean? I mean, we know there's tampering everywhere, but Iowa just got busted for early improper contact before Cade was officially in the portal. So, that doesn't mean there was improper contact, but it smells like it did 2 years ago. So there's just some things that situation makes me a little bit squirmish. And I think if you bring him in, that basically says so long to Marco Lainez. And maybe that means so long to Marco Lainez anyways. And some people they're convinced because of what they hear certain people repeat online and on message boards. They're just convinced that Marco Lainez can't throw a football. So they're just, to heck with him and his whole future at Iowa anyways. I'm not in that boat. I like the fact that they have got a really athletic guy in Marco Lainez who is still green. And by the way, he's only a redshirt freshman this year. Only a redshirt freshman. He's still very young. He's coming off a thumb injury. Sounds like he's going to be healthy for the bowl game. Will he play? We don't know. But I'm just saying, you bring in a guy, if you're going to bring in a guy and potentially drive off a young talent piece, now bring in a guy who's got at least a couple of years and man alive, just make sure that it's not another drama queen. And I guess I just called Cade McNamara a drama queen, but I don't want that to happen again. And I don't think it will, but hopefully you can see where I'm coming from, because there are some similarities, and he's from Southern California. So, that's a big jump from Southern California. He literally grew up in Southern California, went to USC, and now he's interested in potentially coming to Iowa. So here's the deal. There are other schools on his list as well. According to NACOS, he could end up at any one of those schools. And who knows if Iowa can compete NIL-wise with Louisville and Michigan and those other schools on the list. So I'm not about to jump on that hype train this early. And even if it was likely to happen, I'd have some reservations.
Yeah. And this is the tough thing too. Like, we haven't seen, and I'm curious to see after a couple of years here what quarterback development looks like at Iowa, because we've said over and over again for years that Iowa can't develop quarterbacks. And in the past, what that meant is if you couldn't recruit and develop quarterbacks, you had no quarterbacks, right? So now, whether we like it or not, they at least have the option to buy a quarterback. And people don't like when that phrase is used, but that's what it is. I mean, everybody knows the good transfer quarterbacks cost over $1 million, and they're throwing money at these kids. So at least now there's a way out if you can't develop a certain position. That's kind of the way I look at it. Iowa, if they can't develop a Marco Lainez, if they can't develop some of the younger guys that they've recruited over the last couple of years, they at least do have some way out. But man, if the same story repeats itself again, now I'm a little bit more optimistic that it wouldn't with Miller Moss, purely because unless I'm missing something, I don't think he has the injury history that Cade had when he came to Iowa.
The thing about Cade, when he initially committed, Kyle, I advocated for that situation. The reason I thought that situation fit was because of who Iowa's quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator was.
Yeah, that's kind of the variable. Is we're waiting to see what a Tim Lester developed quarterback from start to finish looks like.
Right. So why do I want to see a guy who is coming in? I don't know that that's the type of guy that we need to see from Tim Lester. I maybe, unless they're in some win now mode that I'm not aware of. Like, if we want to talk about a rebuilding year, and like you said earlier, maybe this is just the new era where you're just going year to year to year to year to year. If that's the case, then I guess I'll throw my hands up, because I don't have the answers. But I would think with Tim Lester's acumen and his coaching experience, pedigree, history, and his playing history, that they'd be better suited to go after a guy who's got at least a couple of years of eligibility remaining, and that Tim can form a relationship and work with and acclimate to this offense. But